I've been really enjoying music that uses really humanistic sounding drums, as well as more dub style kits. Because of this, I've been inspired to sit down and create another live pack that creates an amazing and easy to use drum rack to create a nice dub drum sound. So at my site, subaqueousmusic.com, you can download a pack which has the Drums Lite. And this is a unique drum rack that I put together with recordings that I made in a studio a few years ago of a drum kit, and I've processed it to make a really clean, beautiful sounding drum kit. Then at my site for sale, I have the more advanced version, and it has more controls with room and overhead levels and some other unique things in here. And then there's also a trash version. So I'll go over those later, but to start, I'll go over the one that's just free on the site. Just go there and you can download it. So in the studio, we recorded a full drum kit, and we used multiple different miking to get the best quality sound we could. And then I went through and processed all those different recordings and put it together into this drum rack. So this is the light version, which means that it's not using as many samples and doesn't have more of the advanced features, but it's still a really awesome drum rack that can be used in your production, and it has some cool and uses in the rack that I'll show you real quick. So I have these different elements here, which I can just play for you. And actually, I put together these different MIDI patterns so that you can just play them and listen to different dub drum patterns. So let's play that. And this is just a beautiful sounding kit that if you download it, you can right away start using it. Really simple. And then we have these different effects here. So volume, that's pretty straightforward. And what I did, this was a really cool idea that I had and implemented, is this effect dry and wet. So basically, when I look in my chain, my drum saw, let's look at the kick. And in here, I have an effect rack, which is set to dry and wet. And in it is an EQ. So what that means is when you bring this down, you're not playing the EQ, and up, it is playing the EQ. But the thing is, that EQ is on every element within the rack. So when it's down, you're hearing just the dry version. But when you bring it all the way up, you're hearing the EQ'd one, which lets you dial in the exact sound very quickly and easily. So let's play this. So this is unprocessed with the EQing. And here's with the EQing. So the EQ makes it a lot more clean. It just cleaned up some low-end stuff on like the hats and things like that. Then we have the boost. So when I move the boost, let me just fold this so you can see when I move the boost, it's boosting an aspect of that EQ. So I went through and found out whatever frequency which is the most prominent within that sample, I added the ability to boost it. So now when you're playing it, you can bring in the EQ, and then you can boost those parts of it. And you can hear that with this, it really makes it a lot clearer. It gives it a lot more punch. Then the last two here, I used the return track feature of a rack to put together some interesting effects. So the first one is the York Compressor, and this is a parallel compressor where the signal will come in if you send it over to it, and it'll run it through a compressor and then an EQ8 that brings out the mid-range. And what this means is you can get a really nice punch that's added on top of the kit. So with it off, all the way on. Just gives it a nice low end and a nice top end. And it's also keeping the dry signal, so it really just boosts and adds a nice layer to the rack. Then I have this stereo space, so play it again. And this is using a utility to just give it more width. It's made to make it sound a little bit more in the background as compared to the forefront. It's a subtle effect, but it really helps when you're figuring out where your elements are within your production. So now that we have that, let's look at the more advanced ones that I have on my site. So now that we've looked at the rack, something else that comes with this free pack is all these different MIDI clips. And there's 19 different MIDI clips that I've put together. And they're different dub style rhythms. So you can easily just come in here and play it. And then once you have it, you can start getting a little bit more advanced by moving the hats to open or closed or whatever you might want. That way you have a really easy way to just lay down some awesome drums in your production. Now we're going to look at what comes with the paid version off the site, subaqueousmusic.com. So again, you can just go ahead and download the Drums Lite, but if you want a more advanced rack that gives you a lot more possibilities for your production and wider range, then check out all these cool things. And also, if you're not interested in buying this rack, you can still watch the rest of this video and get some cool ideas of how you might build a rack to give it a much more humanistic sound and some different techniques. So let's start by looking at the kick. When we have the kick, instead of just having one sample, we're actually having multiple samples of the kick. And what I did is I took these recordings at the recording studio and I chopped up the different velocity, tonation of the hits, and then put them into a drum rack where I can then, basically when I'm playing at different velocities, it'll play different, slightly different variations of that same element. So that way I can get a much wider range of humanistic sound out of my performance and my production. So when I have this kick, let's just play this. So it's going right now in between this light one and this medium one. It also has a little bit of the hard kick. And that's with every element here. There's multiple versions of every element in this rack. Then not only are there multiple versions of it, but there's different samples that make up that sound. So we have basically 3 samples for each element. And the first one is a dry signal. It's just the straight mics on the kit. Then the second one is room, which is when we were at their studio, we set up a room mic, and it's just the room recording. And then we also have just an overhead recording. And then each of these are set to a macro knob, which will then control and bring up the overheads of each of the samples, the room of each of the samples, and so on. So now when I play this, we can hear those different qualities. There's dry, room, overhead. And the reason I did this is so that you can really dial in the exact sound that you want using these already optimized, amazing recordings from the studio. So you can say, okay, I want a lot of dry and a little room. This is a pretty good setting. It has a nice liveliness to it. So that's what each one of these, and then you also have the same EQ effect, boost, compressor, and so on. And this drum rack uses 192 different samples to give it that really humanistic sound with different versions of every element. Then I took it a step further with the dub drums trashed. And the idea of this one was I took those clean, beautiful recordings and I just trashed them. I processed them and added unique, gritty quality to it. So that in your production you can have maybe a different section that brings in the same drums, but in a totally different way. And Like the other one, what I did is I have these macro knobs, control it so you can bring up these different versions. And then in each one of the cells, there are different samples separated by velocity. So that way you can get a nice, interesting dynamic sound out of it. So let's just play this. I'm going to bring up these 4 different versions. This trashed breath one was a really interesting thing that I did with reduxing, as well as removing certain sound qualities. Then I have the dub trash, dark, phased. One of the reasons I separated with these different macro knobs is I can actually bring in different elements to get an exact sound that I want. So not only with this rack are you getting an interesting drum rack, but you're getting the ability to dial it in and move it to create a multiple range of possible drum sounds. So you're not just getting one rack, you're getting the ability to make tons of different versions and sounds out of that one rack. There's also these are also optimized for Lvie's push, so that you have the 8 macro knobs here, so you can easily change and morph the sound, as well as go one step further in granular control to each of these elements where you have more macro knobs. So you have the volume, velocity, transpose, and detune, so you can get each element how you want it, as well as the entire kit. So go check out the free version of this, of the Aqua Dub Drums Lite. It's at aquasmusic.com. Start playing with that one. Or if you wanted to, you can get the more advanced version on the site with the dry room overhead, as well as these crazy trash drums. And yeah, enjoy these awesome racks optimized and put together for you.